Hi, everyone. Welcome to this iteration of Ask a Biller. Today, we're doing the need to know of being audited. So, just again, our brief agenda here. We're going to start off just kind of introducing ourselves, and then we're going to answer some pre-submitted questions, and then with some time at the end, we'll go ahead and have a live Q&A. So I'm Avery. I've been working here at SimplePractice for 3 years now. And after working closely with healthcare providers, I've come to really understand the importance of insurance and, how important it is to get knowledge regarding it out there. So I'm happy to be here and be doing this and playing my part in making sure I can go ahead and get everybody that knowledge. And then the woman of the hour, Barbara Griswold. She's a practice consultant and the author of Navigating the Insurance Maze, the Therapist's Complete Guide to Working with Insurance and Whether You Should, now in its 8th edition. Her experience includes over 30 years in private practice, working with dozens of insurance plans. She provides consultations and trainings to individual therapists and groups nationwide around insurance, documentation, and practice building. And if you want to contact her with questions or anything else, you can go to theinsurancemaze.com and you can get in contact with her there. So again, we do these videos. If you want to go back and watch, any of the previous ones, you can go to simplepractice.com/askabiller series. You'll have to go ahead and enter in your email, and from there you'll have access to all the previous videos, and you can gain all the knowledge you can about insurance. Cool. So to start off here, our first question is, how is an audit different from a clinical treatment review? From Katie N.
Well, hi, Avery. I just want to say hi to everyone. Thank you for putting aside this time to look into the whole topic of audits, which is a pretty scary topic for us. So a lot of people avoid this whole topic. So congratulations on your bravery, I like to say, when you're confronting this topic. So thanks for all your great questions too. They were really interesting. So I wanted to put this one first because we kind of have a lot of terror around audits. So many times I get a call from someone, they are like, oh, I'm being audited. Oh, I'm being audited. And actually, I would say 7 times out of 10, it's not an audit. It's just we've gotten contacted by the insurance plan for some reason, and we always put it in the audit bucket because that's the one we're most terrified about. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of contacts you might get from an insurance plan that are or aren't an audit, and even some audits that you shouldn't be worried about. So let's start with, how is an audit different from a clinical treatment review? An audit is usually a records request, or actually asking for the client's records. They might have many reasons for that, which we're going to go over. But a clinical treatment review is usually by phone, where the insurance plan is reaching out and they're going to ask you some questions about your treatment. And it's usually designed to see whether or not they want to continue to pay for services that you're rendering and how frequent. So if you're seeing somebody weekly, they might just be checking in to see, do they think they still want to pay for weekly sessions? Do they think you could cut back to every 2 sessions, twice a month sessions? Do they think that there really exists a need for treatment, which we'll talk more about too. So that's more of a clinical treatment review, which is kind of forward focused. An audit is often kind of more backward focused, or you've submitted a claim to them and they are looking at whether or not they want to pay it, and they're looking for notes. So again, we'll talk more about those. So the big difference between audits and clinical reviews are clinical, usually by phone, usually future forward focused, and really they're not looking for your notes. Audit, usually looking for your notes.
So the next questions we have here, I've never signed a contract with an insurance plan. My records can't get audited, can they? From Soraya C. You want to tackle that one really quick, and then we can go on to the next one?
Well, I put them both here because they're both good. So put the second one too, and we'll address them together.
So from Erica G, we have, is there anything specific we need to know about auditing if we are an out-of-network provider?
right? So these are both about being an out-of-network provider. You've never signed an audit, you never signed a contract with an insurance plan. Do you even need to know about this stuff? And I think most therapists are really surprised to find out that yes, you need to worry about this. Your records can be audited by an insurance plan. And the way I word it is anytime you give clients a super bill, also known as a statement or an invoice to turn into their insurance plan, you've basically opened the door, the client has opened the door for your records to be looked at by that insurance plan, or for you to get a clinical review. The insurance plan basically now can say, yeah, we want to find out more about your treatment to see whether we want to pay for this or reimburse the client for it. So this is a big surprise to most out-of-network providers that they kind of didn't get, many of you didn't get involved with insurance for just this reason, that you didn't want insurance in your business. And so it's kind of a surprise to know that this is probably the #1 thing that you need to know as an out-of-network provider, that your notes still have to be terrific, because you may still need to defend your treatment or use those notes to help your client get reimbursed.
So the next question we have here is, what types of audits / record requests are there? From Terry K.
All right, so I figured it was easier to just make a little slide here for this one, so I did. As she goes right past it. So there's lots of different types, but here are the main types. The ones that we're most afraid of are the ones that are payment related, right? We don't like our money going back out the door once we've gotten it, or we want to be paid for the services we have rendered. Yay, that makes sense. So the two types that are related to money or claims would be a prepayment audit. That's when you have submitted a claim to the insurance plan and they might say, hey, before we pay this, we want to see your notes. Or the opposite is a post-payment audit. We have already paid these claims, but we want to come back and we do it like an audit. The insurance plans sometimes do an audit once a year where they'll pull out random folks and just say, hey, we want to go back and have your notes for 6 months or a year or whatever for claims we've already paid, right? And we want to look at those notes. These are the ones that have, and this is what's called a clawback, if they ask for money back because your notes are not good enough. These are the ones that scare us the most. I mean, can you imagine? I've seen people getting requests for $15,000 back, $19,000 back when they ask for a year's worth of records, and then your records are determined to be, substandard, and they're like, okay, we want our money back. And so certain insurance plans are doing that. I would say most insurance plans are not. So we kind of have taken our fear to a great big level that, oh, all insurance plans do this. I've seen it pretty limited to a couple insurance plans, but it is something that scares us a lot. So those are the two types of claim related ones. One where they hold up a claim and don't pay it until you give the records, and the other after they've already paid it and then they ask for records. And this post-payment audits are usually when they're going back and they're looking for any kind of fraud. They're looking for ways to see if they've overpaid you in some manner. And I have a whole webinar on fraud that I just did this weekend, and they don't have to prove that you committed fraud. They just have to prove that you made some major mistake, and whether you intentionally did it or whether you did it in order to get paid for something you shouldn't have gotten paid for, they don't really care. They're going to ask for money back if they feel that you made some major mistake in your billing or something like that. All right, let's move on. There's two other types of major audits that we really don't need to be so concerned about. One is a documentation audit. This is where they ask for your charts. We're going to talk more about this later. It has nothing to do with money. It's just basically that they have to, by law, ask for a certain number of charts to see if what's in your chart is what's supposed to be in your chart if you're a network provider. So it's a review. It's usually like If you get 70% of the 100% things that they want to see in it, you're fine. If you are less, then they'll ask you to fix and get better, and then you can improve. So this is like a fix-it ticket. It's not one that you should be so worried about. Not that these aren't stressful, but it doesn't involve money. And then there's a risk adjustment audit, which we'll talk more about.
I got a call from some company named Involun. I'm gonna have a hard time pronouncing some of these, but these companies saying they were requesting records. Why did I get this? I'm freaking out, and this is coming from various people.
Yeah. So those Inovalon, Ciox Health, Cotivity, Datafied, Episource, and Alliant are some of the biggest ones out there that are requesting records. And they freak us out both because we don't know these companies. Why are they asking for our records? If it's one thing, if a health plan asks for our records, we kind of understand who these people are who are asking. But usually you'll get a letter that'll have like Ciox Health, and then inside the letter, it'll have also a letter from Blue Cross or Aetna or some other one. And basically they are asking for records, working together to ask for records. The health plan has hired one of these organizations to get the records. So these are kind of record retrieval companies that they hire. Don't freak out. This is a very common administrative thing that's happening out there. So let's talk about this. I can guess almost 99 out of 100% that these are risk adjustment audits. Now, what do you need to know about risk adjustment? Basically, this is something that is instituted by the Affordable Care Act. So it'll probably mention that you want to look and read the letter that you get, not the one from these organizations, but the ones that is included from the health plan. And it'll say it's a risk adjustment audit. Basically, the short end of a very complex story is that before the Affordable Care Act, health plans used to be able to discriminate against people based on their health conditions. They could refuse to cover people, they could charge them more, they could this, they could that. Now they can't do that. So they kind of made a deal that they would the health plans that had unhealthy people on them would get some money with the health plans who had people sign up who had more healthy people, right? So basically, they are trying to find a way by looking through our records to see how unhealthy their members are. Think of it as statistical, though. They are just going through, looking at our charts. They're not looking, the good thing about risk adjustment requests is they're not looking at your treatment. They're not looking at how good your notes are. They're not looking at whether or not they want to, approve future treatment. It's whatever you were to give them, they're looking for some statistical information about the health of the client so that they can report and perhaps get some money back from the government because they have more unhealthy members. Okay, so that's a whole thing, and you can read more about that on my website if you want. But what I just want to tell you is, if you see the words risk adjustment, you can completely relax. While they ask for progress notes, you probably don't need to send them. At the beginning, they used to be very picky about wanting progress notes. Now, what I'm finding across the board is that you probably can just send a quick treatment summary. So even if you have terrible notes or non-existent notes, you can probably just write up a quick treatment summary. And like, what should you include? I have a template in my store that's just for risk adjustment. Don't use the summary for anything else. But it's like 6 lines of, here's all that they need to know, and this is what they're asking for. And I've talked to many different agencies, and this usually satisfies them and they go away. Now, one of the questions that I get a lot is a client release required for you to release this treatment summary? So let's talk about client releases. In general, for these type of things that we're going to be talking about, client releases are not required because you likely got one up front, first of all. when they came to therapy, where they signed whatever information, they gave permission to release information to the insurance plan. And these people are acting for the insurance plan. The second thing is that when the client joined the insurance plan, they signed something up front, basically saying, you give us the right to talk to your providers and to get information from your providers as needed for administrative functions. And the third thing is when you joined the insurance plan, you agreed to, cooperate with administrative requests like these. So there's already been 3 levels of releases, I would say. So you don't really need to reach out to your client.
What are the major issues or triggers that force an audit? Why would I be chosen? Tanya.
Yeah, I would say that when people get one of these scary letters or get a letter, they always come to me with a reason that they think they were chosen. Oh, this client, I think he's so difficult, and maybe he complained about me. And we kind of over personalize a lot of these audits. Like a lot of the times you were chosen completely randomly. And sometimes I think we overthink exactly why we were chosen. So I wouldn't spend any time on this question. Well, not any time, but let's talk about some possible audit triggers. So like I said, usually random, usually you are part of a big fishing expedition on their part and you were just caught in the net. They are often required by their oversight agencies to do a certain number of audits to make sure your provider files have what they need in them, or for these risk adjustment audits, these are required by the health plan. So there's different things that they need to live up to, and you might have just been selected at random. Now, there are some reasons why you might be chosen, and it could be the frequency of sessions. That would be one reason that I would say moves you to the front of the line of why you might be chosen for an audit. If you're doing twice a week or 3 times a week sessions, this could get the attention of the health plan statistically. Now, this does not mean that you should ever not do twice a week sessions if your client's in crisis. I never want to take into account what the insurance plan will pay for and not to give the client care. I mean, the care that they need. But so if they're in a crisis, definitely see them twice a week. If you think that that is clinically sound, just write down why in their documentation, why you think that's important and necessary, and what the symptoms are, and etc. But if they see the high frequency of sessions going on and on for months, that could trigger an audit where they might want to see your notes or do a clinical review to see why that's happening. The number of sessions for a diagnosis. So it could be just that you've given some minor diagnosis or adjustment disorder, and we've had a high number of sessions for the diagnosis. And here's another one, using the 90837, which is the 60-minute CPT code, or the 99354, which is a prolonged services code. For some plans particularly, most notably Optum, United Healthcare, United Behavioral Health, that's kind of one big organization, and Medicare. They tend to focus in on people who are doing those codes. Now you can tell me, I have worked with Optum forever and I've always used 90837 and I've never been audited. Right. I'm not saying that it's a one-on-one thing that you will be audited. I'm saying your chances of being audited go up if you use the 90837 with those 2 plans particularly. Let me speak a little bit about Optum. Optum actually has published policy, or Optum, United Behavioral Health, United Healthcare, has actually published policies that they feel like that is an extended service code, the 90837, and really should be reserved for complex cases when you're using EMDR, when you're using trauma-informed treatment, some kind of protocol that takes longer, systematic desensitization, when you're working with some kind of dual diagnosis cases. So they would want you, they might call you up for a clinical review and ask you, why are you doing that? And again, I would want you to defend in your notes why, if with those plans, why you are doing the longer sessions. Now, some people have said, oh, I don't want to have to be audited, so I'm going to dial down and use the 90834, which is a CPT code for a 45-minute session. I really don't feel that you should do that with all your health plans. I mean, I would just do it with the health plans, perhaps, that take this view and are auditing heavily for that particular CPT code.
I hear the 90837 60-minute CPT code is being more closely scrutinized. Should I stop using this code? From Susan J.
Yeah, I just started to go there. So basically, I advise people, no, keep using it, because with all the health plans, except maybe not with United Healthcare, Optum, and maybe think about Medicare. But I understand you're going to tell me, but I get paid $20 less, or I get paid $15 less. It's a significant income hit when you dial down to a lower code sometimes, depending on the health plan. Some health plans pay the same, so it's no big deal. But I don't think that across the board you should dial down and lose income. For those two, it's something to think about. All I'm saying is, if you do keep using the 90837, I would want you to have excellent, take the time to get training on excellent documentation. And then in each session, I probably would say 90837 necessary, medically necessary due to, and then write a line. And it could be something like, client's history of trauma takes longer to process in session, or it could be doing DBT protocol takes longer, or doing EMDR protocol takes, and I'm not saying that with every health plan, I'm saying with these two health plans. Also Pacific Source, I think, which is a smaller plan, but they're also doing some auditing of this code, I believe.
Would an audit ever be concerned with a sliding fee payment schedule? From Angela Yu.
I think the safe answer would be no. For the most part, insurance plans do not have the right to say anything about your out-of-network fees. They just look at what they're willing to reimburse. So they're not going to be looking into this stuff. I certainly have never heard it. I would be very surprised. In my fraud webinar, we talked a lot about what is ethical about sliding fees. And a few quick things to take away here is that sliding fees are perfectly fine. They're perfectly ethical, as long as the major mistake, I don't want to say perfectly fine. I mean, there's certainly ways that they could be unethical, but the big mistake sometimes people make is, if you slide your fee for people, then if you give them some kind of an invoice or a statement or super bill to give to their insurance plan, it needs to reflect the fee they paid, not the fee that your usual fee, because basically that's fraud. You've told the insurance plan basically that they've paid a number that they didn't pay, and they actually could get reimbursed a higher fee than they actually paid, or it will be credited to their deductible a higher amount than they actually paid. So this is probably the biggest mistake I see when people that could be insurance fraud, or that I don't think it would lead to an audit per se, but watch out for that one. There's also a lot of other things. I hope you'll tune into my insurance fraud webinar, which is now in my store. But it has some really interesting things about sliding scale fees. We have lots of questions about that.
I got a request for a full client medical record. Can I refuse this? What can I expect? What type of information will the insurance companies want to see? From Sasha C.
Great question. So this, remember back when I was naming the different types of audits you could get, this is one of those ones that's not payment related, but because you joined your network provider, they have the right to make sure that you are keeping in a client record everything that needs to be in there. So can you refuse this? No, because you joined the network, and you said when you joined the network basically that they have the right to make sure you're keeping the right things. What can I expect? Basically, they're going to ask to see one chart or two charts or whatever. You would need to show them a chart. They would ask for not just your progress notes in this case, they will ask to see your release forms for that client and your, what else, your release to talk to a treating doctor, perhaps, your treatment agreements that you had with the client, any informed consents that you gave up front. They're kind of just wanting to see how you put together your chart and what's in it, make sure that everything is there and everything's in your session notes and things like that. Now, again, like we said before, this is like they have a list of things they want to see. They're going to go down and check off whether you have all those things. And if not, you're going to get some score, and they'll say, hey, yeah, you passed, but here's some things that you might want to make sure you do next time because these were missing. Or they'll say, you failed. And usually what they'll do is say, here are the things that you need to improve. And maybe they will come back in 3 months or ask you to resubmit in 3 months or 6 months or whatever, and see if you will pass that next time. So usually like we said, it's a fix-it type of ticket, and you have an opportunity. They're not going to usually kick. I've never heard where they've kicked you out of the plan. There's really no teeth here. It's just a quality improvement thing that they are required to do. Now, what will insurance plans want to see? Instead of spending 20 minutes talking about exactly what they want to see, I thought because you guys have showed up for this, yay you, I am going to give you 2 audit record tools. These are basically what should be in your charts. One is from Aetna and one is from Optum. And these are treatment record tools that they use to actually just, so they're not trying to hide, like, this isn't like a blind test. You can download from most insurance plans, like, what do they want to see in your records? And this will give you an idea of some things if you download these 2 things. So all you need to do is go to the highlighted thing there, theinsurancemaze.com/SP audit. I've put there where you can get your Aetna record tool, your Optum audit tool. You can join my mailing list. Has all kinds of other information about cool resources that I have. You will have to enter your email address. That's the cost of the freebie. But hopefully you will find this webinar helpful enough to want to hear about other ones that I'm doing and also to get these freebies. All right. So I'm going to leave it there 1 more minute. Theinsurancemaze.com, write this down, /SP audit. We'll talk about it again, but you're going to get those record review criteria. And I think it'll be helpful for you to be able to go through your chart.
If my records are requested, might they ask for money back? Might I have to refund payments if the insurance company is not satisfied with my clinical notes? From Jaden H.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. It's really rare, but it does happen. I think if you are on any Facebook page with other therapists, it makes it sound like it happens every day to every therapist out there. It's, can be very terrifying to a lot of the people I talk to because there's a lot, social media tends to amplify how frequently something happens and our other people's fears amplify. But certainly, I have heard in all the years I've been doing consultations, I've only talked to a couple people who it's happened to, but it is happening. And with certain plans, as I said, United Healthcare is actually the one that I ended up quitting because they are doing this. Optum, United Healthcare, and Medicare are the ones that and Pacific Source are the only ones that I know of at this time that are doing requests for money back. And to me, I feel really upset about that. It's one thing to inform and they're doing it to out-of-network people. Here's the scary thing. These are people who didn't even join the network. These are therapists who have just given their clients a super bill or a statement to turn in. They never agreed to anything that needed to be in their documentation, and yet their records are being requested, and if their charts aren't good enough, then their clients aren't going to be reimbursed. Like, that is just like horrible. So yes, the answer to this is yes. It is a possibility that you might have to refund a payment if they're not satisfied with your notes. What did I have on the next slide here? So let's say they ask for your notes, and you send them in. Why might they say, yeah, we want money back? What are some repayment request triggers? Like I said, it's unlikely they will ask for the money back, but here's why they might say, yeah, we want money back. First of all, if there's no documentation or insufficient documentation for the session. So if they say, hey, we want you to send us your notes for last February, and you look and you have no documentation for those sessions, that seems kind of obvious. You can't prove that you even had the sessions, or your documentation was just insufficient. It may be very sketchy, it may be illegible, it may be you only wrote a few lines about something a client said, and it's not even a full sentence. Maybe you didn't even say something about yourself and how you showed what you provided and interventions you did in the session. Lack of actual start and stop times. This is a new one for a lot of you, but I'm on a mission to get everyone to do this. Insurance plans want you to be documenting the actual therapy start and stop time of each session, because that's one of the things they're looking for now. They are worried that a lot of us are billing for a higher level length session, maybe 60-minute session, when we actually only provided a 45-minute session. So they want us to be recording the actual therapy start and stop time. So 11:02 to 11:55, next week 11:04 to 11:53, whatever. And you can't include time spent scheduling the next session, time spent waiting for your client, time spent documenting. So just the therapy portion, and then you choose your code based on that. They're looking for incorrect coding. One person I know got asked to pay money back because he had coded all couples therapy sessions using the 90837 individual therapy code. This is a common mistake people are making, but it's definitely one that they can ask for money back. You can't use the 90837 or 90834 for ongoing couples therapy. Lack of documented medical necessity. So insurance plans do not pay for personal growth work. They are wanting to hear in every one of your session notes, really, is there a need for treatment here? How are you supporting the diagnosis? Is there anxiety? We want to hear a need for treatment. What are the client's symptoms of anxiety or depression or insomnia or substance use? In every note, you should be thinking about, how am I defending that there's a need for treatment when you're billing insurance? Another one is like no notes submitted, like maybe they asked for notes and you didn't submit any. That will lead to them not paying or asking for money back. Not documenting your interventions, as I said earlier, or client progress. Medicare focuses on progress. They have sometimes been known not to pay for if you don't write the client making progress. So you should be documenting that. No documentation of telehealth consent. Again, this is a Medicare one, but other plans might look for it, is that they want to make sure that you either have a written telehealth consent with the client that's in your chart, or that in each session you're going to have to say, talk to the client, get their telehealth consent. But I think that's kind of probably nutty. I would definitely get a written telehealth consent. from the client one time. And lack of a treatment plan or good enough treatment plan. This is one I've seen them refuse to pay for sessions because there was no treatment plan or it really wasn't measurable and wasn't symptom focused enough. We tend to make the mistake of to make our treatment plans about like personal growth, like client will have better self-esteem or client will have more self-confidence. And those are things that insurance really doesn't pay for. We need to make them very symptom focused. Client will reduce anxiety, client will reduce depression. I have a whole webinar on how to write a 10-minute treatment plan that insurance plans will love. And that's another webinar on my store page of my website. So definitely check that out. All right.
What if I get a records request and my records are non-existent or really poor? Can I clean them up a bit? From Athena W.
Yeah, I was doing a webinar on this and somebody said, my friends have really bad, like my friend has really bad notes. Can she, like, yeah, there's a lot of my friends questions that get submitted. This is often one of them. I can't tell you how often people call me up and they're literally in tears because they've gotten a records request and they either don't have notes, maybe a year's worth, 2 years worth of notes, or they hold up their notes to the video and they show me what their notes are, and maybe it's a line, maybe, like I said, it's illegible, maybe it's something that no other person could even understand. So they're terrified because they know, and to answer your question, we really legally cannot go back and write a note and make it look like you wrote it at the time. So that is fraud, right? But people feel caught between that, committing fraud, and turning in a non-existent note, which you can't turn in, or turning in a note that's really poor and facing those consequences. So I can't stress enough. I hope it motivates people enough that you start really writing notes that you would be confident if you had to release right now. And that one of the things I guess I want to address here is that we tend to think of our records for us, that these are my records. And I really want to encourage everyone to stop thinking of records that way. These records, I am the custodian of my client's records. My client can request these records at any time. My client may need the records I've written to fight a disability case on her behalf. My client may need my notes to go to her insurance plan. My client may need my notes to send to a future physician if I got hit by a bus today. So basically, we should never be thinking of them as I keep these to help me. We should be writing them in a way that's very journalistic and that anyone could pick them up and understand what has happened. Okay, so that's a little of a detour, but I really need people to understand this. And when you make that shift, I think it can really help. Now, the bottom line is you cannot clean up records. You can't go back and edit records. You can't cross things out. You can't rewrite them unless you say that you rewrote them. So you can pretty much, you can't alter a record. You can add something. But if you add something, you have to say when it was added. And so one thing that some people are doing is saying, well, I have handwritten notes, but they're very unreadable. Well, if you want to clean them up, the only thing I could say is, yes, you could rewrite them, but at the end, you would need to write, that you wrote them on today's date and that these are from handwritten notes taken at the time of the session, or something like that. You would have to just be super clear about when that was entered into the client's record and what it is based on. So you can't just make it look like you entered that note at the time of the session. So the short answer to that, now that I've made the long answer, is you can't there's some ways to clean them up, but you cannot make it look as if you wrote a note at the time to be ethical and legal.
If one person gets audited, does it affect the whole practice? From Karen W.
That's a good question. I can't speak to like it never does, but I would say that if you're in a group, I would say it could. I don't have enough experience, I would say, to say that this always does. I've seen people get audited and it does not affect anyone else in their practice. But if you're billing under the auspices of your group owner, it is possible that an investigation could go further than that one person if they feel like the group owner did not, that the group was billing in some kind of way that was fraudulent. So it kind of depends, I would say, but I think the answer is it could.
I got a request for my records. What is the first thing I should do? From Cecilia W.
Yeah, I'm going to say that basically don't panic. That's often I talk to people, they make an appointment with me, like I got this records request, and I'll say to them, okay, well, what does it say in the letter? And they're like, I don't know, I'm too nervous to read it. And I'll be like, look, you need to read it and just look for the words risk adjustment. And they'll be reading it, they'll be like, no, it's not in there anywhere. And I'm like, send it to me, let me look it through it. And the name risk adjustments on there 12 times. So, we get so nervous that we can't even sometimes calm down enough to read and see what they're asking for. And of course, I'm not trying to say that health plans are wonderful at communicating what they're asking for and why. They are terrible. But if you get something from, like I said, you recognize those names, Ciox or Cotivity or Datafied or Inovalon, and you see that one on top, just ignore that page for a minute and go right to the health plan page and look for the words risk adjustment. That's the first thing. Well, that's a little farther down. There's usually a deadline on there that says we want you to submit your records by X date. I always think of those deadlines as very soft. Don't panic, because sometimes we get them like on Friday, February 2nd, and they want the records request says you need to respond by February 4th. It's ridiculous. Like, what? Why are you? So, you certainly usually can call them up and say, hey, I just got this, and I need to get a consultation about this, and usually they're fine. I think they usually put down silly deadlines so that you are rush you to get them back. But I don't think most of those deadlines are actually set in stone. I haven't seen any consequences that happen. They usually send out a second request or a third request. So obviously the deadline was not too set in stone. Now read it carefully to see what is the purpose of the request. If it's a prepayment request, it's going to say in it, this is a prepayment request, or it'll say well, it won't say post-payment, but it'll say a retrospective audit, or these are claims that you submitted last year. So it should say, if you really read it carefully, what the purpose of, or you're going to look for those words risk adjustment. And as soon as you see risk adjustment, you can be like, oh, good. This is just statistical. I don't need to worry about this or submit my notes. I'll probably just can write a quick treatment summary for this person and be done with it. Contact the requesting agency. And the most important thing you should ask is this something that I can just write a treatment summary for if you don't want to release your notes, which most of us don't really want to. And don't just release a treatment summary thinking that for all types of audits. If you get a documentation audit, you can't just release a treatment summary. If you get a claims related audit and you do a treatment summary, they're going to deny your claims. So the only type that I know that you can submit a treatment summary should be a risk adjustment audit. So don't guess what they want. Call them up and that ask them. But you know, they often are not very clued into what they want and what you should put in your treatment summary. So don't overthink it if it's risk adjustment. Don't worry too much about that one. You certainly can consult your professional association. They often will advise you. Contact me. You know, when people get any kind of letter from an insurance plan, I always tell them just contact me. And I ask them, send me a scan of it or an email, take a picture of it, and I'll look at it and go, yeah, don't worry about this one or worry about this one, or here's what your next step should be. Now remember not to release psychotherapy notes. It'll say in it, and sometimes this confuses people. In the records request, it'll say, we want your notes, we want your progress notes, but don't release psychotherapy notes. People are like, what? They just asked for my notes. Now they're saying don't release your notes. Many of you don't realize that there are two types of notes as defined by HIPAA. There's progress notes, which are your session notes that you are required to keep each session, outlining, you know, what the service you provided was, what the client talked about, what the diagnosis is, what your interventions were, all kinds of that kind of factual stuff, what their symptoms were, all that good stuff. Then there's something called psychotherapy notes, which we often call process notes, and all of us do not keep them, and you're not required to keep them. They are afforded additional confidentiality if you keep them. They need to be kept separate from the progress notes. So separate from the session notes. If you keep these process notes or these psychotherapy notes, they need to be kept physically separated. And these would be like your inner thoughts about the case, your countertransference, your transference issues, your thoughts about kind of theoretical orientation about the case, things that you really don't want to share, and it's afforded a little higher level of psychotherapy, of confidentiality, so that a client couldn't as easily get a hold of it, or it wouldn't be released to an insurance plan. But you have to keep that separate for it to get that extra. So don't keep blended notes if you're keeping these type of process notes or these psychotherapy notes. All right.
What should we make sure is always in our notes or treatment plans to be prepared for insurance audits? From Taylor O.
Okay, thanks, Taylor. Great question. So I wrote down, you know, what should be in your notes. I surveyed 8 different insurance plans to see what are they, you know, should we have in our session notes. And here are the common things that we should have. First of all, instead, if you're doing a telehealth session, we should be moving now to saying video or phone. They're wanting us to differentiate. So for every session, you should be writing down whether it was a video session, with phone session, office session. If it's telehealth, you need to write either the client's exact address or client at home. So we need to be putting the client's location, and that has 2 reasons. Number 1, we need to know where to send help if the client melts down in the middle of session, and you are documenting that you are legally able to perform the services. For example, if this client has gone out of state, you may not be able to see them across state lines. So by putting down their address, you need to be, you're documenting that you are able to see them legally. So we don't want to say legally able to see them. You want to write down their client address so that you could send help to. Now, if they're at home and you have the home address on file, you can just write client at home. That's what I write every time, you know, if the client's at home. Document telehealth consent. So you should have some written telehealth agreement. If you don't have one on file, then you're going to get one each time, as I said. And somebody told me that Medicare was asking them to document the platform that they're using in the telehealth platform that they used. I don't know if that's true. That's a word of mouth thing, but she was audited by Medicare, and she said Medicare was asking her to include the telehealth platform. Ridiculous. As we said, actual therapy session starts and end times, and then choose your codes based on these. Remember that the 90837 60-minute code needs to be 53 minutes and above. The 90834 45-minute individual therapy code is 38 to 52 minutes. So you're going to pick your code based on how long your session was, and you're going to need to down code it sometimes if a client's late or for other reasons the session was shorter than those 53 minutes. Couple sessions are technically 26 minutes and above, just for your information. You should have your date and client's name on every page, and only one client on each page, please. The service type, was it individual, was it couples, was it group? What did the client talk about at that session? What was their statement that they were coming in and talking about that week, and by their description? And your interventions. This is one where I've seen time and time again where in an audit they have refused to pay because the therapist did not write any interventions like what they did during the session. It's not enough to tell the client's story and then go to the next week's session note. You have to say, well, what did you do in response to that? And I always tell people, make sure it's something more than what a mother could do. Make sure it's not just supported, praised, validated. Try to use some things you had to go to grad school to learn. It could just be interpretations you made. It could be connected, current relationship to childhood, current reaction to boyfriend, to father's childhood alcoholism or something. Or, I'm saying that background, to childhood with father's alcoholism, blah, blah, blah. So it can just be something like that. It doesn't have to be a CBT, identified distorted thoughts or worked on distress tolerance or something, but hey, throw those in when you've got them. Try to identify symptoms and impairment, progress toward treatment plan goals, and support for your diagnosis. And date of your next appointment, and don't forget to sign and do your credentials. Couple final things here. The treatment plan, you're going to want to update it every couple months. Make sure your goals are measurable in your treatment plan. They're medically necessary, they're symptom focused and diagnosis related. You have objectives that are measurable, benchmarks along the way to your goals, and your planned interventions, and some anticipated timelines. So if your documentation isn't the best, I've got 2 webinars on this topic: what's missing from your charts, writing great notes, and how to write a 10-minute treatment plan. And those are available at my store, but they're also on our little landing page.
What steps can we take to prevent money loss if we are audited? From Steve L.
So what you can do now, have all your clients sign an informed consent stating that they understand their notes might be requested by a health plan. Make sure that up front you are telling them in your informed consent that their notes might be requested and that they understand that. Review your charts with those documentation audit tools that I sent that are on the landing page. Write every note legibly as if the plan will be reviewing. Make sure it has it's stuffed with good content. With Optum and Medicare particularly, as I said, try to defend in your notes the frequent use of the 90837 if you're doing that, or multiple times weekly sessions. Document those start and stop times. as well as interventions in progress. And make it a priority to keep up with your notes and improve your documentation. If you need help with that, reach out to me and I can help you strategize about that. Because there's a bright side of an audit. These are 3 people who went through an audit, and this is what they shared with me. I take great pride in my clinical work, but documentation was not a priority. After this audit, I learned to make it more of a priority. Somebody else said, well, the audit was stressful. Something good came out of it. I now take more detailed notes, and to my surprise, this is having positive benefits on my therapy. I absolutely find this. I take much more detailed notes than I did in the past, and now I read them before I go into the session, and it really benefits the work that I'm doing. The whole audit experience was actually quite stressful, but in the end, I would consider this experience a positive one. It really helped me improve my notes and note-taking habits. Now I feel good about my notes, I get them done on time, and I won't worry if I get another records request. And that really is the secret here, is like, we want you at any time to know if you get a records request today, you're not going to stress about it. You're going to feel comfortable, you're going to feel calm, and you're going to be like, okay, let me bring it on. I have great records and I feel really comfortable with that. So that's our goal with you tuning in today. Do you want to do more slides, or you want to take some questions? What do you want to do?
So we have time for one more question before we get going. Is there another slide with a question on it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's just answer this one and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So we have, will an insurance plan ever report me to my licensing board if my records aren't good? From Alan C.
So this is like when people are calling me and crying and worrying on the phone, this is like one of people's biggest fears, is that an audit will basically show that the person hasn't been keeping records or hasn't been keeping good records, and they're very afraid of losing their license, something we've all worked very hard to gain. And so the good news here is, and I talked to other attorneys and I said, have you ever heard of this? And I've never heard of it. They've never heard of it. Insurance plans really don't care like to get you in trouble. Their job is, can we get money back? Did we pay things we shouldn't have paid? Is there any way we can not pay something that we don't want to pay? They really aren't interested in getting you in trouble. So the good news here is that I don't think that you should be in any fear of being reported to a licensing board or going to jail or being fined. The worst case scenario is you may have to pay money back to a health plan that if you got paid for services that they didn't think your documentation was good enough. Now that's a bad consequence, but at least it's not losing your license. So.
Okay, hey, well, we're going to go ahead and close this out. Just wanted to thank everyone for coming, and I just wanted to let everybody know that they will be getting a copy of the recording. Barbara, do you want to say one quick thing again about the?
Yeah, I just want to again give you the links, everybody, theinsurancemaze.com/SP audit. Make sure you've written that down to get those review criteria. Join my mailing list, check out other webinars that I'm doing or other resources. And there's my contact information will be on that page and on this page right here. I do all kinds of private practice coaching, insurance questions, notes, practice building, all kinds of stuff. So let me know how I can support your practice.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of your day.